Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to talk about Lifepath-based character generation. So what does that mean? Well, what it means is it is character generation where, as well as getting what you normally get, statistics, as well as getting attributes and possibly skills and so on, you get some explanation of how the character ended up in that situation. So you might have a sort of detailed history of where they grew up and what they did, or you might just have more sort of suggestive prose like we've got here. So let's look at an example of the little program that I've written. It says, "You led the sheep onto the mountain like generations before you. Many children fight, but few as often as you. And you took the world as it was, trusting to fate." And then we have some attributes for a character. I've used sort of abbreviations, but they're intended to be strength, education, willpower, dexterity, luck, and charisma. And you can sort of see how these statements are reflected in what you end up getting. So you led the sheep onto the mountain like generations before you. Well, the character has quite a high dexterity, and we can see that dexterity and agility are not separated. So perhaps that's where the high dexterity comes from. Many children fight, but few as often as you. Well, the strength is quite high, and dexterity, again, that might be why that happened. You took the world as it was, trusting to fate, and we can see that indeed the luck is quite high. Education is quite low. Well, there's nothing in here about sort of being interested in learning or books or anything, so that makes sense. And indeed, that's how it works. Each statement alters attributes. It increases some and decreases others. In this case, I've set it up so that the total of attributes is always going to be the same. So each thing that increases, say, your strength or says you're particularly intelligent or something, it's going to decrease something else. But there's no reason why you have to do it like that. That's just how I like to set it up. So if you add this up, it'll be equal to 60 because I started at 10 and then alter it based on what the statements are. So let's just make sure that's right. So 13 and 8 would be 21. 21 and 15 would be 36. That adds up to 12. So 36 and 12 would be 48, and then 48 and 12 is 60. So let's do another one. Actually, I'll redo this because I got the same one in this third. Oh my goodness, it seems to be really... There we go. Okay. So you preferred to stay indoors, filling your head with stories from old books, so we might expect perhaps high education and less strength or physical kind of characteristics. As a child, things just seem to work out for you. Well, that implies that they'll have high luck, but then we get this other one, which is the gods seem to be testing you, sending you one misfortune after another. So this one's a little bit more middling. It has a low strength and a high education, and you'd probably connect that high education to this first one. And the low strength is really just none of these things suggest suggest a high physical strength. So I'll do one more, and then we can look at the code of how it works. It's actually quite simple. Your family were merchants, and you learnt never to pay full price. As a child, things just seemed to work out for you. You admired the learned and the wise. So we can see now that strength is very low, dexterity is very low, education is very high. Well, that makes sense. When the person is a merchant, you'd expect they'd have a sort of fairly high education, and also most obviously they admired the learned and the wise, so obviously they sort of pursued that later in life. And then we can see that luck and willpower are quite high, which sort of connects to this never pay full price. You'd think, well, that suggests a sort of high willpower, and of course, as a child, things just seem to work out for you, suggests a high luck. So again, we can sort of connect the description of what the character's life was to where they ended up. So let's have a look at the code that makes this happen. As I say, it's quite simple. There's no new concepts here, but I will go through it. So we have $A is the number of attributes. $AN, standing for attribute names, I suppose, is the abbreviations or the names of the attribute, what we're going to print for each attribute. Then we have R, which is the actual values of the attribute. As it says there, everything starts at 10. S is the number of stages. So as you saw that each time there was three descriptions. Then we have the O array, and the O array is how many possibilities there are in each stage. In this, I haven't done very many. Like if you wanted to do this properly, you'd probably do, at least sort of 10 for each one, but I did 7, 6, and 6. Then we have M. M is the text of the things that you can have as events in your life, and then the effect on the attribute. So I'll show you that, and then I'll explain this code. So let's have an example. Here we have all the stage 1 possibilities, then we have the stage 2 possibilities, then we have the stage 3 possibilities. So let's have a look at a specific example. Let's say we have this one. Your parents taught you hard work and perseverance, but alas, little else. And then we have this series of numbers: 3, -3, 3, 0, 0, -3. And if you added those up, you'd find that they added up to 0. And that's true of all of these, because again, I've set it up so that each increase there's a decrease somewhere else. But again, of course, you don't have to do it that way. You can just have one, one's just straight up better than the other, or you could start low and just have increases. You could also have that particular events didn't change your attributes, but instead gave you skills, or changed your attributes and gave you skills. But I've done a very simple version where there's just attributes. So what does 3 -3, 3, 0, 0, -3 mean? Well, as you probably guessed, it is the effect on the attributes in the same order as up here. So 3 -3, 3 means +3 strength, -3 education, +3 willpower. And then 0, 0, -3 means no change to dexterity, no change to luck, and -3 to charisma. And that's how it works for all of them. Just, of course, there's different numbers. So, okay, let's go back to this code. This is a 3-dimensional array, so it's a little bit more complicated than the normal arrays that we work with. Normally we work with 1 or 2-dimensional arrays, but there's no sort of different principle. It works the same. It's just there's sort of one more step. So we have a for loop that goes from 1 to S. Remember, S is the number of stages. We set up $M, $Z to be itself an array, so now it's 2-dimensional. And then we have another for loop that goes from 1 to $O, $Z. Remember, $O is the number of options there are for a given stage. And then we set $M, $Z, $Y. In other words, $M for a given stage and a given number up to the number of options to itself be an array. And then we just have a series of set commands which fill in the data. So set $M11 equals this array, which starts with the text and then has the effect on the attributes, and exactly the same thing is true for all of these other lines. I've separated stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 with a line break just to make it easier to read. Now, remembering, of course, that the very first thing we do when we set up a program, well, the first thing we do perhaps is change it from the initial value to Sugarcube, so we can use the commands that we've learnt. And the second thing is we go into JavaScript and we do this line: config ConfIG dot passages PASSAGES dot NOBR equals true semicolon, which means that when I do a line break in the code, that doesn't mean print a line break on the screen. And that allows me to have layout like having line breaks between all the different attributes and having line breaks between the different between the data that relates to different stages without it translating that as meaning that I want to return on the screen. So having set up M, we then set up R with a for loop. R is the numerical value of the attributes, and as I said, we start it at 10 and move it up and down. Like every bit of information that you get will increase some attributes and decrease others to a total of 0. But again, if you don't want to do it that way, you could have it low and have all of the information increase particular attributes, or you could just have, I suppose you could have it start high and then have everything just decrease attributes if you wanted to, or you could just have just some results are just better than others. I've set it up so that the total of all of the attributes will always be the same, but you don't have to do that. So having set everything up, and then of course we have our normal note that says that we're going to use $Z, $Y, and $X as our temporary variables. Then we go to the only other page of the program, which is create, and we have a for loop. Well, we have two for loops. The first for loop is generating the character and the information. So, well, generating the character. So we have a for loop that goes from 1 to S, which is the number of stages. We generate a random number between 1 and however many options there are for that particular stage. We print the text for that option and that stage, which is $M, $Z, $Y, 0. And then we have a couple of line breaks. Then we have a for loop that goes from 1 to A, which is the number of attributes. And for each of those, set $R, $X plus equals, which means set $R, $X to be equal to its current value plus something else, which in this case is $M, $Z, $Y, $X. Because you will remember that the data is always slot 0, because always the first slot in an array is always slot 0. Slot 0 is the text, and then the slots 1 through to 6 are the effects on the different attributes. And so we do that $S times, which is 3 times, and then the other loop is that we print the results. We've already printed the text of the events, but we now print out the attributes. So we have a for loop that goes from 1 to $A. We print $AN, $Z, $AN is the name of the attribute, so STR or EDU or whatever it may be. Then a colon, then the value of the attribute, which is $R, $Z. And then, of course, a line break so that it's not all on the same line. And that is how you do Lifepath style character generation. Now, there's a lot more that can be done with this style. You can go into a lot more detail. What I've done is very much a sort of demo version. But if people are interested, I'll cover that in a subsequent video, more options. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you'll tune in next time.